Welcome to Expert Views on ADR Ever, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or appropriate dispute resolution ADR in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes or conflicts with arbitration, collaborative law, negotiation, conciliation, and early neutral evaluation. My name is DrChinweEgbunike, postdoctoral fellow at the University of Brighton, United Kingdom, and a fellow of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. I am pleased to welcome Lee Jay Berman to the EVA show. He is the founder and president of the American Institute of Mediation, AIM. Before this, he was a director of Pepperdine Law School's Mediating the Litigated Case program. He is a Hollywood mediator, executive coach, trainer, lecturer, and keynote speaker on mediation, conflict resolution, and negotiation topics. Lee Jay has been a conflict analyst on the KTLA 5 Morning News in Los Angeles. He co-hosted a radio talk show on conflict resolution called Talk It Over and authors a popular blog, Eye on Conflict. He wears many hats, so I've left the link to his profile below. Welcome to the show, Lee Jay. I'm honored to have you.
Chinwe, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you for coming, honoring the invitation as well. So without further ado, question one is, how far has ADR enhanced access to justice in California?
So we're so fortunate here, thanks to the work of some of the early pioneers who started back before me, I'm so sorry, in the early 1990s. One example of how far it's come is we have a program that takes every legal filing fee in our courts and takes $8 from that filing fee and puts it into a fund throughout the state of California, all the lawsuits, and we have many.
Wow.
And that $8 per lawsuit gets put back into community dispute resolution programs through neighborhood justice centers and community mediation programs who can apply for those funds to help fund their program.
Wow.
So we're actually taking money being spent on litigation and rerouting it back to preventative mediation to avoid future lawsuits in those cases. So I think we've come a very, very long way, and I can't take credit for it. It preceded me, but I think it's an amazing step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's true. So question two is there any measurable difference or impact on the cost and time frame for settling disputes under ADR compared to litigation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Litigation, because so much is at stake, because it's win, it's win at all costs. I'm sorry. It's win at all costs, and you can't afford not to. Litigation's about learning as much as you can about the other side's case, and that's a very costly endeavor usually. With mediation, for example, as one of the ADR methods you mentioned earlier, mediation, you only have to know enough to make it an informed decision about how you want resolution to be. And even with arbitration, which is the most formal, perhaps the most formal form of ADR, it still gives you the ability to choose your neutral instead of the court appointing them. And cost-wise, while that may be more expensive to pay for that person where the state or the government would provide a judge to you in litigation, that person can limit the lengths of discovery that people go to and can hear a case. Here in California, I would bet right now our average is 2 to 2.5 years to get a case to trial in front of a judge, where with an arbitrator, you can do it in 3 months. And so just the cost associated with that is tremendous savings.
Oh, okay. Thank you so very much. But some of the scholars on this show, they've pointed out that arbitration should not be under appropriate or alternative methods because it's getting quite expensive, just like litigation. What do you think about that?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, that's the arbitrator's discretion to say, no, instead of 16 depositions per side, you can have 2, pick your best 2. So the arbitrator has to be involved in controlling those costs and keeping the parties moving forward. But it's an alternative still, because you get to customize the system, the program, the arbitration itself to a certain degree. Again, you get to select your own neutral who might be an expert in your field rather than somebody who is a judge who's more of a generalist usually. And I think just the freedom of choice and the ways in which people participate in arbitration, the individuality of it makes it much more alternative to the mainstream system, I think.
So that's it still has the party autonomy. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so very much. So in line with your article, Avoiding Workplace Litigation, can you give me 3 tips or strategies for avoiding conflict or disputes?
Listen, listen, and listen.
That's a good one. Listen.
In the workplace, when there's conflict, human behavior, I think, naturally is we go into our own minds and we stop listening to what's happening outside of us. And we start thinking, and we're, as you know, we're developing our counter arguments instead of really trying to listen to what's going on for the other person. And I think when we hit conflict, the default in human nature is to go to battle to win. And I think that spurs a bunch of behaviors that actually prevent the resolution of conflict. If we're thinking about how can I help them get what they want and me get what I want also, that starts with listening. We have to hear what about this is so upsetting to the other person and address that so that we can get past all the emotion. And I don't mean that it's something to bypass, but I mean to understand it and work with it and satisfy it to a degree where we can begin now to talk about going forward from here. Because the emotion is usually tied to the past tense. You did this to me. I didn't like the way you did that. You're always doing this, those sorts of things. Mediation is much, and conflict resolution generally is much more forward focused. And we're looking at where do we go from here? And I think what that does is it requires a mindset shift. And in order to know where we collectively together go from here, we have to listen and understand the other people. So I really do think that's first, second, and third. Certainly using language like I just talked about could be the second, perhaps. We, us, let's, together, our, and joint ownership of the problem, joint ownership of the project, whatever it is that people have in conflict over, and the relationship. I think those are the probably the 2 most important things that lead to sort of taking the off ramp from that 5-lane paved highway that goes right to a big fight and getting off road and taking a different course. And those are the 2 things that I find help people do that most readily. And they're not that hard.
Sorry?
And they're not that hard.
Oh, no, they're not at all. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Jim.
So to what extent are employees encouraged to use ADR to settle discrimination, bullying, and harassment in the workplace?
It's a great question. It really, truly depends on the leadership team of that organization. So I'm very, very fortunate right now in the United States. I'm getting to do with a team of partners. We're getting to do a lot of work with a large statewide court system. And in fact, I fly tomorrow to go be with them for a day and a half to help them understand how to manage conflict and how to recognize and understand discrimination, not just because somebody raises their hand and says, I've been discriminated against, but to see it themselves when it happens and to understand what it is and what it means to that person. And we're actually taking them through a variety of the kinds of trauma that people go through, whether it's just change in the workplace, post-COVID. I know here in North America, we're having a lot of debates about who needs to come back to the office in person and who can work remotely from, via Zoom like this. Whether it's that or whether it's some other form of discrimination or racialized or historical trauma that people are experiencing, we're trying to help the leadership of this court system, the top judges and the top operations folks, all understand this so that they can encourage and train people beneath them to do exactly as you're saying, Chinwe, and understand it and recognize it and be more skilled at what to do when it comes up.
Yeah, thank you so very much. So, are employees aware of ADR options in the workplace that they can opt for it, especially mediation in America?
I would say not as much as we would like yet. I think
Wow.
the line employee who's working on an assembly line or who's, sitting at a desk as a clerk or an assistant or something like that, I don't think they necessarily know these options are available, even if the human resources department has circulated a writing, a document, a brochure that says, here are your options if there's a dispute or if you feel discriminated against. I think most people aren't yet empowered enough to know. And I think that takes success stories. Somebody has to go back into the workplace and say, I had this mediation and it changed everything and it was fantastic. And then
Yeah.
their coworkers all say, oh, well, what's that? And then they learn organically that way, I think.
Yeah, so in line with what you just said now, so what is the way forward for the mass advocacy of ADR?
It's a great question. I think it's partly that. I think it's partly success stories. And I think it's education. I think one of the problems is when you and I call it ADR, alternative or appropriate dispute resolution, we know what we mean. But most people who aren't in this field or in the legal profession don't really know what that means. And when we say mediation to a normal person on the street, it's mediation and arbitration and litigation all sound so similar that I
Yeah.
think most people think it's a quasi-legal process. Whatever it is, it's kind of legal and it's important and it's scary. And I think when we call it conflict resolution or conflict management, um, when I get brought into a workplace, I tell them, don't tell them I'm a mediator. Don't call me a mediator. Tell them I'm a consultant or I'm just someone who specializes in conflict so that they'll understand I'm there to help them, but it's not a legal kind of process they should be afraid of or that they need representation
Yeah.
in a workplace situation like that.
All right. Thank you so very much. So, what is your advice for people pursuing a career in ADR?
Um, I think it's a lot of studying.
Hmm.
The basic threshold course that we teach here in most of the United States is a 40-hour introduction to mediation course.
Yeah.
Mine is called Mediating and uh, Commercial and Litigated Cases because that's what it focuses on. But when we get the evaluations back from the people who've taken the course, inevitably the most popular comment that everybody makes when it's over after 5 days of 8-hour days, they all say, I had no idea there was so much to this. And I think once people realize it's more than just hearing both sides or offering an opinion about who's right or something, when they really understand the nuance and the process and everything that we mediators are doing and thinking while we're helping them resolve their conflict, that's the best way to start. And then continuing education and learning from the masters like Ken Cloak and others that you've had on your show. I think that the more people continue to learn, the more success they have in helping others, which keeps them wanting to learn more and do more.
Okay, so learning is number one.
I think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very much. So, can you tell me more about AIM?
Yes, thank you for asking. So AIM is an acronym, stands for the American Institute of Mediation.
Yeah.
And when it was my time to leave Pepperdine University's Mediating the Litigated Case program, where I was the director for 7 years, part of why I wanted to leave was because the university setting was, at the time at least, was very formulaic and did everything the same way. They've been teaching the same program for 23 years and never changed it to update it or anything. And at the time I left, all of this new interesting science was coming to us from psychology and neuroscience and all these other places outside of the field of mediation. And I started this institute along with Ken Cloak and Doug Knoll and Erica Fox and Jim Alamed and all the people who I thought were the greatest trainers I know. And I brought us all together to teach more of this cutting edge advanced work. So we offer the mediating commercial and litigated cases course that I mentioned.
Yeah.
But what we really do well is we have all of these pre-recorded workshops and webinars and things that we offer to people with some of the greatest trainers in the world, taking it to the next level and teaching more of the advanced skills and helping those who are already out there mediating do a better job of it. And those who want to learn to mediate, there's a lot of material there for them. So our goal is to be a gathering place for mediators to come together and learn, and also to raise the level of practice in mediators across the globe so that the perception of what we do is held in the high regard that I feel like it should be.
Oh, thank you so very much. Oh my goodness, this is a masterclass on the workplace conflict in California. It was quite educative. I learned quite a lot. And then also, I believe that potential users would embrace all you've stated here and opt for ADR, particularly mediation, whenever the need arises. And employers as well should train their human resource management teams and, hire people that are skilled in mediation, to speak to employees from time to time and educate them about this option that is available to them as well. Right. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. And to my listeners, thank you so very much for your constant support. Stay tuned same time for more episodes on ADR and workplace conflict. Bye. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so very much for coming.